doing today. As you may have noticed, I have a new chair. Actually, it's not new at all. It's just that I just replaced the chair over there to this one so that I wouldn't have to, like, prop myself with my knees stuff to be higher. Logic! And so this is something that I've been kind of knowing for a while. I saw this Halloween special, Mr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And basically what she's doing is she's giving a little overview, like a movie review, I think, of the book, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I thought, okay, this looks interesting. I'm a little bit of a Jackie, so I start watching it. And in the first little bit, I just start thinking, oh, there's gotta be a reaction. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to react to this. My eardrums. So that's what we are doing. Here we go. Ready, set. Oh, wait. I need sound. Sound! Alright, Mrs. Overly Sarcastic Productions.
There's a theme in these Halloween episodes. Whenever I examine one of these cultural touchstones in the context of the impact they've had on the horror genre, it always seems like the actual core story is almost completely unrecognizable compared to their pop culture impact. Dracula's a grody old man with a very unsexy case of vampirism. Van Helsing's a total goofball. Frankenstein's monster is an articulate, scientifically minded genius. Lovecraft's iconic pantheon of brain-melting nightmare gods frequently take a back seat to his own racist neuroses. Victor Frankenstein's not even a doctor. It's ridiculous. Pop culture takes some names, some concepts, and some special effects and leaves behind everything that actually makes the story what it is. And that's not always a bad thing. But what about those horror icons, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? Surely pop culture wouldn't lead us astray with something as simple as a split personality.
Well...
Let's start with a little context. Like many horror stories of this
Here we
era,
go.
The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde takes the audience through a slow build-up of increasingly mysterious and unsettling events.
That is true. Through the eyes... Oh, wait, she might say
the
that.
twist is finally revealed all at once in the end, explaining the true horror behind the mystery and tying the story together. This is unfortunate because thanks to pop culture osmosis, everybody knows the big twist. Jekyll and Hyde is straight up synonymous with split personalities these days, and every modern reader thus already knows what connects the respected Dr. Jekyll with the mysterious Mr. Hyde. But this foreknowledge is actually a little misleading, and the actual story is honestly much more interesting than one might expect from the pop culture impact. So let's take a look. Our POV character isn't the titular good doctor.
Okay, first, we start with this, like, little prompt, punctual.
Himself, and is instead a dude named Gabriel John Utterson, whose
your protagonist and children.
primary defining characteristic is that he is extremely boring. He
Personality. A sandwich. That's kind of true. Utterson is he doesn't have much emotion to admit.
extremely boring. He likes taking weekly walks with his equally
Wait, did he say... Oh, wait, no. Weekly, not weakling, sorry.
boring cousin, one Richard Enfield, and it's on one of these walks that Enfield breaks their comfortable miasma of boredom by
So something happened the other day. Impossible.
recounting an interesting anecdote that happened at a nearby house. See, Enfield was walking home very late one night when he spotted two other pedestrians on the a little girl running and a man walking. The girl runs into the man, and the man bowls her over and keeps walking, prompting some very respectable outrage from Enfield. Enfield keeps the man from leaving the scene of the crime, and the girl's family pop out to see if she's okay, along with a local doctor. The girl's basically fine, just really freaked out, but the weird thing is that everyone at the scene reflexively hates the guy who ran her over. Like, obviously he's an trampling a little girl, but like, they really hate him. Guess he's just got one of those faces. Also, this charming gentleman is Mr. Hyde, in case you haven't guessed. So while
I really hate it.
the ladies of the family barely resist the urge to go all Maynard on him, Enfield and the doctor carefully suggest that maybe Hyde can pay the family a healthy sum to forget this ever happened. He begrudgingly agrees and dips into the house, returning 10 minutes later with a check written and signed not by him, but by a very respected member of the community. Enfield is shocked
Oh, I guess who that is.
to find the check is genuine and says he's worried that Mr. Hyde might be blackmailing this upstanding pillar of the community into paying to cover his crimes.
Whom he
Enfield
knows.
also mentions that it's really weird because he could swear that Hyde had some kind of messed up quality to his appearance, like a deformity or something, but he can't pin down anything that was actually wrong. He can't even really remember what Hyde looks like. Guess
That is fascinating, by the way. The fact that Hyde, according to this, looks normal, like physically, he's not deformed in any way. Yet when you come in contact with him, there's like this vulgarness, like there's something wrong, kind of like she described. There's something wrong about him, but like there's a deformity there, but it's not in physically. Like there's an aura that he gives off that's just wrong, you know? And I think that's what a lot of people mistaken about Mr. Hyde in itself. They immediately assume that it's his physical appearance when it does say in the book that it's not.
Hyde is a proud citizen of the Uncanny Valley. Anyway, it turns out Utterson actually
Wait, terribly sorry, my good man, but I already confess I don't know who you mean. Oh, I say!
already knows which pillar of the community Hyde might be blackmailing because he's the lawyer in charge of the finances of one Dr. Jekyll, and Dr. Jekyll recently made Mr. Hyde his sole beneficiary in his will, and
Give all my stuff to Hyde, Dr. Jekyll. P.S. It's fine, don't worry about it. That's true. Jekyll was rather chill about this whole scenario in the first chunk of the book. He was rather chill, that Hyde.
pillar of the
As if he was his best friend, like, oh no, it's fine, it's completely cool.
will, and
He did.
specified in it that if Dr. Jekyll disappeared under mysterious circumstances for more than 3 months, Mr. Hyde should be given all of his stuff, no questions asked.
No questions. That is the face of a suspicious circumstance.
Utterson obviously finds this extremely suspicious and worries that Hyde is blackmailing Jekyll and is planning to kill him for his money. So Utterson decides to investigate
Reasonable.
what's up with Dr. Jekyll and starts with a mutual friend of theirs, one Dr. Lanyon.
Oh, who kind of hates Jekyll, by the way. Terribly sorry, my good man, but I haven't spoken to Jekyll in nigh on 10 years.
Very dapper and jovial gentleman who unfortunately says he hasn't been very close with Jekyll for close on 10 years. Not since Jekyll started getting into dark science.
Trauma.
So that's a dead end, and Utterson starts trying to look into Mr. Hyde instead, with the strange feeling that if he could just get a look at his face, everything would make sense. Utterson stakes out the house where Enfield saw Hyde.
And he stays there for like, a week.
Face. Everything would make sense. Utterson stakes out the house where Enfield saw Hyde and eventually manages to catch him, but seeing his face does nothing to help, and he's just more confused.
Accurate.
Utterson finally decides to just talk to Dr. Jekyll about it, but unfortunately he's not at home,
Mr. Hyde asked Dr. Jekyll to give him the run of the place.
so he talks to his servants instead, who mention that Jekyll gave them special orders to do whatever Mr. Hyde says
He did.
and to give him the run of the place if he shows up. Utterson concludes that Mr. Hyde must have some serious dirt on Jekyll and is very worried about what that dastardly Mr. Hyde might do to him. But as luck would have it, Dr. Jekyll hosts a dinner party 2 weeks later, and we finally get to actually see our focal character.
And he is absolutely fine.
He's a very nice older man in his 50s. Utterson sticks around after dinner to have a little chat with him and expresses his concerns about this Mr. Hyde. But Jekyll is very uncomfortable talking about him and tells Utterson that Hyde isn't a problem.
Oh, wait, hold up. I'm just concerned. Really. Don't be. I'm really fine.
His concerns about this Mr. Hyde. But Jekyll is very uncomfortable talking about him and tells Utterson that Hyde isn't a problem and he can get rid of him whenever he wants.
But that was an interesting point in the book.
So that's reassuring. The next thing...
Oh, that's fine. That's reassuring. Not suspicious at all. Mr. Hyde kills super murders his... Oh, this is great. This is great. I'm enjoying this a lot.
It's a murder. A saintly older gentleman is out taking a walk late one night when he bumps into Mr. Hyde, asks him
Hello, good sir. Would you happen to know your way around this lovely
for
neighborhood?
directions and is immediately murdered. A maid immediately murdered.
KO!
A maid witnesses the murder and calls the
Look at Hyde's face. That is the definition of an crap.
cops, and upon investigation, Utterson realizes that the cane used to kill the old man belongs to Dr. Jekyll. Investigating Hyde's personal address, they find some servants, some nice furniture, and the other half of the murder weapon.
Okay, and by the way, the lady is quite creepy.
And when Utterson goes to check in on Jekyll, he finds the good doctor is almost hysterical, saying he's done with Hyde for good.
He's hysterical. He is clearly lost a lot of sleep. He probably hasn't washed in like a week, probably more. You'll never see me again, so don't worry about it, Hyde. Basically saying I need to get rid of this
He
man.
gives Utterson a letter written by Hyde to Jekyll, apologizing for all the trouble and reassuring him that he has the perfect means of escape and will never bother him again. Utterson's reassured and tells Jekyll he really dodged a bullet because Hyde clearly intended to kill him.
Oh no, Jekyll's face. Jekyll's face is like, if only you knew.
But that reassurance cracks a little when, on the way out, a servant tells him no messenger came by the house.
A letter? No, we haven't had any delivered.
So Hyde couldn't have had this letter delivered. Utterson is worried and has his clerk look over the letter, and coincidentally receives a letter from Jekyll inviting him to dinner around the same time. But the clerk compares the letters and concludes they were written by the same person.
That's fascinating, might I add. But the guy, analyzed it, and it was pretty much a match.
Uterson's very concerned, because now it looks like Dr. Jekyll is covering for Mr. Hyde, who's, a murderer. But
A very bad thing to cover for!
he keeps his concerns to himself, because for all the police investigations, there's no sign of Mr. Hyde, like he's just vanished into thin air.
And there's no proof that Dr. Jekyll is covering.
Coincidentally, Dr. Jekyll seems to be doing much better until he suddenly isn't, confines himself to his house and refuses all visitors.
Pretty much, yeah, within a month? 3 months? Lanyon, can we talk about Jekyll? Hello?
Very concerned, Utterson tries to visit Dr. Lanyon again, but finds that Lanyon has also fallen very ill and probably only has weeks to live. Lanyon says he's had a horrible shock and is sure he'll never recover, and when Utterson mentions that Jekyll's also ill, Lanyon freaks out and tells him not
Do not speak of that madman's name!
to speak his name. Jekyll's officially dead to him for crimes against science.
This should not make me laugh as much as it did Crimes Against Science.
So Utterson sends a letter to Jekyll asking what happened and what's wrong, and Jekyll writes back to say he's sorry, his friendship with Lanyon can never be repaired, he needs to seclude himself for the rest of his life, it's entirely his own fault and everything sucks.
Oh, buddy boy. Don't read until Jekyll does something awfully stupid.
Lanyon dies shortly thereafter, but leaves a sealed note for Utterson with the instructions that he should only open it if Jekyll dies or disappears. Utterson keeps trying to see Jekyll, and during one of his customary walks with Enfield, they pass by Jekyll's house and briefly chat with him through a window until Jekyll dips out mid-sentence and slams it shut.
And by the way, has a very horrified look on his face while doing so.
Things just keep getting more ominous and weird, and then one day, one of Jekyll's servants comes to Utterson's door.
Mr. Poole, sir, I think we have something might have gone wrong.
Scared out of his mind. He says they've been terrified for over a week, and they think there might have been some foul play. The servant brings Utterson to Jekyll's estate, where he sees all of Jekyll's servants huddled in the entryway, really freaked out. The servant very quietly brings Utterson to Jekyll's lab, which
Excuse me, sir, Mr. Utterson is asking for
is
you.
locked and barricaded from the inside. And when the servant calls in that Utterson is there to visit, the voice that tells him to go away isn't Jekyll.
Nope, it is not. It is somebody
And
else.
it hasn't been Jekyll for 8 days. The
Oh.
servant privately tells Utterson that whoever's in the lab, they've had him running around town like a madman trying to get a very specific chemical salt that never seems to be the one he wants.
It's not working.
They both agree that the voice inside the lab sounded like Mr. Hyde, and they decide to break down the door. As they batter
they do.
down the door, Hyde pleads for
Don't do it, man. Basically a modern version of what he said. Basically, don't do it, man.
mercy and then shoots himself just as they break in. They
Yep. Yeah, that's why I didn't. Yeah. Oh no, poor guy.
wearing Jekyll's clothes, but there's no sign of Jekyll himself. How mysterious. And they also find a note from
Sorry about all the weird stuff. Here's an explanation. Oh, my money!
also find a note from Jekyll telling Utterson that he's revised his will to leave everything to Utterson, and also telling him to read Lanyon's note before Jekyll's note, and that together they'll explain everything.
Which he did.
So Lanyon's note explains that he'd received an urgent letter from Jekyll directing him to break into his lab with his servant's help, retrieve a very specific drawer, and
Help!
with his servant's help, retrieve a very specific drawer and hand it off to a man who had come for it at midnight. That he can't explain why right now, but it's vitally important he do so, and if he wants, Jekyll can explain everything afterwards. Lanyon is very suspicious, but agrees, and examines
I've got other plans. Why am I doing
the
this?
contents of the drawer after retrieving it. It's some chemical salts, a flask with a liquid in it, and a notebook with a list of dates and the occasional note like double or total failure. Lanyon concludes that one of Jekyll's mad science projects must have gone wrong, but he doesn't understand why this would possibly pose a danger to Jekyll's life, so while he plays along, he's still very suspicious. At midnight, a small creepy man he's never met
You got the stuff? I think you should be more intimidated in Hyde's presence. I don't know about you, but I would.
man he's never met comes for the drawer and mixes some stuff together, producing a color-changing concoction that looks and smells terrible. Then he asks if Lanyon really wants to know what's going on,
Sure, I guess. I've nothing else to do.
warning that once he learns it, he won't be able to unlearn it. He's too curious at this point to say no, so the small man drinks the chemical, and lo and behold, he gruesomely transforms into none other than Dr. Jekyll. Lanyon is too busy describing how shocked and horrified he is to communicate what exactly Jekyll says when he explains how the potion works, but he's sure to note that Jekyll tells him his small, creepy alter ego was, of course, Mr. Hyde. So Utterson turns to Jekyll's note.
Keep reading, lol.
So Utterson turns to Jekyll's notes, and we get a very interesting snapshot of the man behind the mad science. See, while pop culture loves the idea of Mr. Hyde as a kind of superpowered evil split personality, like the Hulk but short, the truth is actually
The Hulk, but short.
more unsettling. Dr. Jekyll is rich, smart, cultured.
Okay, again, this is a view. This is an opinion. Because there are two opinions. Either A, Hyde is literally a split evil alter ego, or B, it is this, which
Healthy and well respected, but all his
that, and it's fine to have an opinion. I'm not mad at this opinion. I have a different opinion for her, but she can have her opinion.
well respected, but all his life he has struggled with nebulous and unspecified base urges. What exactly these base urges are is literally never described, but given Victorian standards of decency, it could be anything from cannibalizing orphans to doing drag. Let's not get too speculative here. The bottom line is that Jekyll has a part of himself that he's deeply ashamed of, and by the time he's made something of himself, he's gotten very used to burying these eccentricities under a thick blanket of shame. Victorians, am I right? Anyway, because of this, Jekyll starts dividing his perception of himself.
Good, respectable, well-liked, wealthy. Gainfully... Wait, what? Employed, boring, bad, all the fun stuff.
Along strictly moral lines, seeing the good doctor and pillar of the community as his good side and all those unspecified base urges as his evil side. And so he begins researching ways to make this split a little more literal. In the end, he comes up with a chemical concoction capable of transforming his body to reflect this other side of himself. It's really worth noting that Jekyll and Hyde are not two different people.
Mr. Hyde does what would disgrace... What? But they're the same person. Yes! It's very confusing, but yes. That's very confusing for a person out of the fandom, because you're like, what?
Jekyll and Hyde are not two different people or personalities. Jekyll is the name he gives his good, socially acceptable qualities, while Hyde is the name he gives his evil, shameful ones.
Jekyll keeps appearances. Doesn't need to, he doesn't care.
When he transforms his body, he doesn't change his mind, he just drops his inhibitions. Transformed into Mr. Hyde, he feels younger, freer. He even theorizes that his evil body is physically younger because he spent so little time being evil compared to being good. So the good Dr. Jekyll is pushing 50, but the evil Mr. Hyde is maybe in his 20s. Whatever, this thing is basically a magic potion anyway, let's not get all scientific here. So now that he doesn't have to keep up appearances all the time, Jekyll, as Hyde, goes out and does whatever he wants. Jekyll, as Hyde, goes out and does whatever he wants. Whatever that is. In essence...
Why did that remind me of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where it's like all dramatic with cards?
In essence, he's given himself a chemical secret identity. Feels like a domino mask could have had the same effect, but hey, I'm not the mad scientist here. Anyway, he sets up his secret identity, Hyde, with a swanky house and some servants, and modifies his will to guarantee he'll be in a good position even if something goes wrong. But something does go wrong. The more he indulges his unspecified base desire...
Wait, if you get a repressed Victorian secret identity. Oh, what is this?
The more he wants to. His impulses get nastier and nastier, and while he's still having a good time, things are getting riskier as his activities escalate. As Hyde, he does whatever he wants with impunity, and as Jekyll, he cleans up the mess and indulges in a cleansing dose of shame for his sins.
I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to feel that, to be able to do whatever I want and then be so shameful afterwards.
He cleans up the mess and indulges in a cleansing dose of shame for his sins. Victorians, man. But he starts getting careless and dangerous. By indulging his every desire, he starts attracting attention. He narrowly escapes consequences when he tramples that child and takes some precautions to avoid having to attach Jekyll's name to Hyde's finances. And then one day, he goes to bed as Jekyll and wakes up as Hyde.
I mean, oh, that's an epic, that's an epic, like, oh, dang! Oh no.
He freaks out at this. If he starts changing without the chemical, will he reach the point where the chemical doesn't work to change him back? Jekyll plays a vital role as his safe identity. If he loses that, he'll be stuck dealing with the consequences for Hyde's actions. This is the wake-up call he needed, and he decides he has to choose which of his identities to keep, the friendless and despicable Hyde or the respectable but repressed Jekyll. So he decides to stay as Jekyll and goes cold turkey for a good 2 months. But Having known the freedom of the anonymity of Hyde, Jekyll can no longer stand to stay in his restrictive, respectable lifestyle, so he just does a little hit and immediately murders an old man.
He just drinks the potion one time and immediately murders it. Hashtag just say no, kids.
Oops. The problem is, killing
Whoops. Oh, whoops-a-daisy.
this guy has actual serious consequences. Hyde is no longer a convenient anonymizing mask for Jekyll. He's a wanted criminal. Jekyll freaks out and scrambles to cover his tracks, but in a way is kind of relieved. Without Hyde as an option, it'll be
Fully a wanted murder. Okay. He's like, oh no.
Without Hyde as an option, it'll be easier for him psychologically to stay as Jekyll. So he moves on with his life and indulges in the occasional unspecified base urge. No chemical enhancement this time, just the same way any wealthy upper-class man indulges.
Wait, what is this? I think that's something inappropriate. I don't know.
But unfortunately, even without using the chemical, this still feeds his evil side enough that it starts to trigger the transformation all on its own. This leads to an incident where he transforms outside the safety of his lab, and has to conscript Lanyon's help to transform back. But for all the work they put into that, Jekyll keeps changing involuntarily. He hides in his lab to avoid tipping off his servants, and despite his best efforts, whenever he goes to sleep, he wakes up as Hyde. And then things get worse somehow when he runs out of the chemical salt he needs for the potion. He sends his servant out to get some, but the new batches aren't working. He suspects there must have been some unknown impurity in the first batch, and without it, the potion has no effect. With no way to change back, he barricades himself in the lab and deteriorates. By this point, he is almost describing Jekyll and Hyde as two separate personalities, with Hyde desperate and furious and Jekyll resigned to his fate. He closes out the note by saying he's all out of the chemical.
Should've just got a cursed portrait done like that Dorian guy did down the road. Okay, bye. I don't know what that means. Okay, bye. Peace out, Jekyll. Ah! I gotta stay inside.
Closes out the note by saying he's all out of the chemical and the next time he transforms will be the last, which means he's basically already dead, so we might as well make it official. And on that cheerful note, the story comes to a close. I think if there's one takeaway we can get from this, it's that Dr. Jekyll is a much better mad scientist archetype than Victor Frankenstein. He rigorous notes on his unethical experiments, takes responsibility for the consequences of his dark science, and uses himself as a test subject because he's not a coward? Much better mad scientist.
Winner, Dr. Jekyll, for best... I don't know how to read that, mad scientist.
Mad science role model than a college dropout who ditched his first experiment for having the wrong eye color.
Victor, and then my experiment worked, but it was really spooky and the eyes were all wrong, so I ran away and got sick for 3 months. Dr. Jekyll, SCD, pouring an unknown chemical into a can of Red Bull and chugging unfortunate...